Tier 1 SOF. Did so-called Tier 1 Special Operations units in the US and NATO become bloated during the global war on terror? Are units full of Tier 1 operators who train to perform missions with huge amounts of support from Tier 2 and conventional units backing them up useful in large-scale combat operations, such as in the Russo-Ukrainian War or in a hypothetical China-Taiwan war? Discuss. Not really. SOCOM did double in size, but the mission profile and reach expanded too. Plus, a lot of the perceived bloat is support personnel rather than shooters. Yes, they would be useful in the same way they were used in Vietnam. I realize that Senez leaf suit shit is a sensitive topic for Ukrainians, but that behind-the-lines logistic harassment, ambushing, and sabotage is literally one of the core rules of SOF going back to MACV. That's what your SOF units would be doing much more of in a peer war than training 30s. And as you can see in both Vietnam and on both sides in Ukraine, that's a job with a very short life expectancy, so it's good to have a few hundred more guys on tap to replace losses. It's really more that Delta became an even higher tier unit and thus represents the only true Tier 1 unit, with everything else being lower. And before, seething Euros claimed their SF units who never do anything are totally on Delta's level, and before, seething Russians and tards claimed they're actually trained, not meatwave soldiers, are totally on Delta's level, and before, seething seal-tards. They did amazingly well during the Maduro raid. They raided so fast Maduro couldn't even close his escape room door. I heard on a podcast that the operator barely stopped him from closing the door with the barrel of his rifle. Delta. Besides all the rigorous qualifications, you do need legitimate combat experience compared to the SEALs or Special Forces, which some kid can make their MOS from the get-go. No, anyone can apply. Cooks can apply. Cooks fight hard against hunger and malnutrition. Did so-called Tier 1 Special Operations units in the US and NATO become bloated during the global war on terror? Not really, no. They were just the ones doing the heavy lifting in asymmetric warfare. U.S. Army Tier 1 units, Delta Force ACE, CAG, Intel Support Activity 75th RRC Aviation Technology Office. USAF, 24th STS, AVTEG. U.S. Navy, DevGru/Team 6. U.S. Marines, MARSOC or whatever they're called now. MARSOC isn't Tier 1. In 2003, C Squadron invaded Iraq from the west, then had part of Abrams Tank Company flown in to capture an airfield to support their attack all the way to Tikrit. I'm not sure some people realize how active US SOF units have been in small foreign operations for the last several years. Is it possible that the Delta operators who had actual combat experience in the lead up to the Iraq-Afghanistan are guys we simply don't know of because they weren't allowed to talk about it publicly? How does one objectively measure what tier an SOF unit is? Tier is just a funding term. Tier 1 means they get priority funding, which is the most. JSOC units are Tier 1, but other units can temporarily be Tier 1. Like if Delta needs a battalion of Rangers on a mission, the battalion will be Tier 1 for the duration of training and deployment. I was embedded with JSOC on TF-626 back in 2003-2004, working for OGA. Pretty cool stuff. My team lead called the SF guys the Armed Amish Resistance for their beards and flannels. We'll post some pics. Do land ships make sense in a modern war? What I'm talking about is essentially a modern destroyer on land. Primary role is to protect and escort infantry. A single heavy armored vehicle with a suite of EWAA direct fire and indirect fire systems. Not necessarily the best at these roles, but it's there when you need it. Drones clearing mines and recon ahead of this land ship. Electronic warfare in AA to clear drone-level airspace above infantry. 4+ crew to handle increased operational load controlling drones. Electronic warfare in AA systems. Does a vehicle like this make sense or nah? You're gay, OP. Besides your homosexuality, history proved that more simple shit is always the solution. Imagine the secondaries. Combined arms are just easier. If one thing breaks, it means only one part of the whole is down. Not your entire fleet you crammed onto a single craft. Plus, it's more targets than a single object. I can see a form of land ship happening at some point, but it would be extremely specialized, so not a does-everything vehicle. We are the most powerful military force in the history of man. Every land ship is our land ship, because what gets stuck in the mud over here matters over there. We don't get to tow one out. Learning to use the tools of gay advanced warfare is the difference between the prospering of your thread and utter destruction. We can't give you freedom, but we can give you the know-how to send 5 billion to Israel. And that, my friends, is worth more than America. Sure, it matters who's got the biggest stick, but it matters a hell of a lot more who's behind the guy swinging it. This is a time for donating 10 of these to Israel. A time for using them for demolishing Gaza and making it into a really nice resort I can take my 3 kids to. History is written by your donation tonight of 10 char-2Ms to 1877 chars 4BB. Let's get to work. Not sure about combat effectiveness, but this is a logistical nightmare. This thing cannot fit in any transport platforms except landing ships. But if only fucking around coast areas, then real ships can do better for sure. You should know that the Tiger tank in World War II was too freaking wide and had to have its tracks and wheels changed before boarding a train. And that's still a joke about how Germans love stupidly complicated, over-engineered crap and thus lost every war after the 1900s. What benefit does it provide? Less crew/lower footprint? Besides acting as a single point of failure. Redundancy. Instead of sending a mortar, a tank, a drone team, and an electronic warfare system, you can send 3 of this hypothetical vehicle. And what does it do about a single ATACMS or conventional prompt strike missile deleting this hyper-expensive Wunderwaffe in the first hours of the conflict? Copes, say it never happened and call you Brown. If you have video footage of it happening, it will say it's the other team's identical Wunderwaffe, not theirs, then call you Brown. And delete the post, and if you prove on video it was theirs and not the other guy's, the post will be deleted. You will be called Brown. Then go on a 72-hour involuntary vacation. It's as if you've learned nothing about the 6th generation warfare or how to play it. What exactly are you whining about? It was a retarded idea in 1945, let alone today. One big expensive vehicle doing multiple jobs at once versus multiple cheaper vehicles specializing in their one job. We all know the answer. Sir, your big expensive vehicle that does everything at once? Was being an Allied World War II fighter pilot the comfiest job in the history of all warfare? Lighting up targets that can't fight back and then coming back to base for ice cream must have been comfy. Fighter. Douglas A-20 was a light bomber. Low-level bombing and close air support sorties are probably the most dangerous aerial combat missions. Fight back? No idea what you mean. Fighter aircraft or bomber aircraft? In World War II fighter combat, aerial adversaries were dogfighting with each other. Not really. By Allied, I mean British and American pilots who had absurd kill ratios. Being an American fighter pilot in the early stages of the war was pretty shit. Wildly outclassed by the Zero in the Pacific. Planes are so slow and heavy the British can barely be fucked to use them, and the ones that kinda work have fatal design flaws like locking controls during a dive. Moronic daylight bombing into radar-directed flak and no escort into BF-109s and FW-190s. Flown by pilots with hundreds of kills. It's late war Allied fighter in England for me. Axis already crushed. Comfy officer life in England, alcohol and whores. Low chance of enemy encounters since Axis have no planes or fuel left and they prioritized attacking bombers. Cool views every mission for 10 kilometers up over devastated Europe for 2 hours and back to comfiness in the officer quarters. Closest thing to comfy would have been the FW-200 spotting convoys for the Wolfpacks, since they were too high up to be effectively countered. For the Allies, that would be the ASW patrols in the PBY or Sunderland, the latter having amenities like a small kitchen and toilet, though submarines weren't exactly defenseless. There's also a fine line between comfy and mind-numbingly boring. Uncomfortable, unpressurized cockpit. 30% chance of dying from mechanical failure or accident. People shoot at you. Probably not very comfy. Being a code breaker or something would have been comfy. Nah, there were comfy pilot jobs. My grandfather was a navigator in a Mosquito Reef squadron. They would use radios and flares to guide the bomber streams onto the targets at night. 2 years of flying over Germany and the Balkans, and he only saw combat once when a German night fighter made a single pass on them and missed completely. Almost never flak or AA either, as they would operate in small groups so were usually undetected. In return, he got to mooch around southern Italy for a year and was one of the first to be demobilized and sent home, where he almost immediately got a well-paying job with British Airways. Which was great because before the war he was a store clerk without a degree. Pretty comfy in my opinion. This isn't even bait, it's just ironic shitposting. Only if you ignore being squeezed into a cockpit with zero elbow room for hours at a time at freezing cold altitudes on the world's most insufficient cushion. Lighting up targets that can't fight back? No. If you were in a fighter plane, you'd be trying to shoot down other fighters or bombers. And then come back to base for ice cream. Only if you're an American. Having ice cream was a US flex. What bourgeois nonsense is that? Welcome to the Eastern Front of July 1941, comrade pilot. Here, Tulip picks you. If I had to pick a comfy yet thrilling aviation position, certainly the only coherent choice is flying the hump. Biggest enemy is Mother Earth and Mother Nature. Flyby shootings with a bar. Early happening of Caesar. Slamming poo nanny when you land. Depends when and where. Fighting in France, Britain, or the Med against the Luftwaffe early to mid-war sure as fuck wasn't comfy. Why don't American police use melee weapons anymore like nightsticks and billy clubs? Lawsuits and blood. They realize they can jump straight from fist/failed taser deployment to a gun and be backed by the courts 100% of the time. Even when they lose cases, they face zero repercussions and just move departments for a nice promotion while the city pays any judgments. Why melee when you have guns? Only retards and PLA do things like that. You know how whenever a Red Guard is given simple commands, they instead do the opposite of whatever they are told? Spaz out, and get stuck belligerently shouting one idiotic phrase over and over again like their programming broke, even though it's inapplicable and makes no sense? This keeps going until one of three things happens. They finish their violent act and escape, the taser resets them and resolves the glitch, they get their off button pushed. This means you generally have to beat them into unconsciousness to get them to stop spazzing out, reaching for weapons, or screeching some incoherent babble. This is a bad look for any police department. Fent zombies and AIDS. Any problem that can only be solved by beatings would be better solved by shootings. Any problem that may be solved by beatings but doesn't need to can be de-escalated instead. My dad was a cop in the 70s and 80s. He always said anyone worth beating is worth shooting, and anyone worth shooting is worth shooting twice. AIDS. Not very much use against nutjobs who shoot you in the face when you ask for their driver's license after pulling them over for speeding and erratic driving. Rodney King beating. He deserved it, but really bad optics. Too fat and lazy. Just mag dump and go back to playing Candy Crush. Post-LA riots politics where shooting someone or even giving them the knee is more humane in the eyes of the public than beating them with a club. Your police department will have policy based on the stance of the city attorney, chief, the guidance, and best practices of your peace officer standards and training, commission and board. These will usually outline your legal and department policy on your acceptable use of force continuum. Your force used at all times needs to be reasonable and necessary. This means it should be necessary, not excessive, and ideally used to de-escalate or protect life from imminent harm. Collapsible batons have a good use for breaking windows, compliance hold assistance and pry tool to get things out of arrested parties' hands. They're good at checking bags and tents. However, Usually force at the lower end when batons are acceptable, OC spray, open and closed hand techniques are usually better options that have less risk of serious bodily injury or accidental strikes to lethal areas. Conversely, on the higher end, tasers or your firearm are better suited to keep you safe in a rapidly escalating situation. Lawyers and media have demonstrated batons using imagery of brutality cases like Rodney King or arrested individuals with bruises, hematomas, broken bones, etc. In fact, some departments' training will advise you, if you have to use the baton, to swing as hard as possible to limit the number of impact sites. They carry more liability to the officer to a court case. Cameras everywhere put an end to that. In the eyes of the public and legal system, it's far more preferable to wait until the criminal crosses whatever arbitrary line to justify a shoot. De-escalation is a meme. AIDS. Not even joking. Cops are deathly afraid of getting blood on them. Opiate residue and bloodborne pathogen risk cut down on the tune-up sessions. Every time they've gotten into a CQC situation in the past decade, they've ended up wasted by some hobo with a knife. They just aren't trained for it. Norm droids cry when they video of n***ers getting beat. Why don't American police use melee weapons anymore like nightsticks and billy clubs? Be American cop with a nightstick. Feral n***er trying to stab a white child. Bonks him over the head. Mission accomplished. N***er has permanent brain damage but isn't dead. Cloyer sues for damages. They're literally too stupid to actually enter prison system. Police station has to downsize and fire people to make ends meet due to budget concerns. Now you have more crime. Or, officer pumps 16 rounds of 9mm into a feral and he bleeds out regardless of medical attention given. No lawsuit, no drain on the prison system, one less criminal. Because our cops don't fuck around and our government isn't afraid of giving their law enforcement firearms and more than one mag worth of bullets. One thing CCP puppets don't like to talk about is how the CCP doesn't trust anyone. Not even their own police and military. As in, both are given very limited amounts of ammo. To make so that if a cop goes rogue, he doesn't have a gun, or if he does have a gun, then he doesn't have the spare ammo. Also, don't forget about what those cops are dealing with. It's almost impossible for anyone to get a gun in China. So the cops are geared towards dealing with baddies with knives and clubs. Is it true that the 25 Beretta is not a good choice for a 00 agent? Was it correct to upgrade James Bond gun to a 7.63mm Walther PPK? Bond was rarely shooting at soldiers and kids, and he was an excellent marksman, almost always engaging at close range. Stopping power was a non-issue for him. Concealment and suppression were everything. Accuracy and reliability would probably be factors too, but those are pretty subjective. In-universe Bond is just wrong. Hugh knows much more about guns and gives him a better one. IRL, Fleming didn't know that much about guns and got a fan letter from a gun autist telling him what he was doing wrong. James Bond used a Beretta in the first novels of the series by Ian Fleming. Bond's pistol is described as a very flat 25 Beretta. The model number is never specified by Fleming. Automatic with a skeleton grip, i.e., side panels removed, frame only, and a threaded barrel to support a suppressor. At the end of the 5th novel, From Russia with Love, Bond is unable to draw the Beretta at a critical moment when its suppressor catches on the waistband of his trousers and is very nearly killed as a result. The incident leads to an order from his superior officer, M, to start carrying a new duty weapon in the opening chapters of the 6th novel. Dr. No, Major Boothroyd, the MI6 armorer, and the greatest small arms expert in the world, in M's opinion, insists that Bond trade it for a weapon with more stopping power. In reality, Ian Fleming received a fan letter dated May 23, 1956 from Jeffrey Boothroyd, a Bond enthusiast and gun expert, criticizing the choice of firearm for Bond. Boothroyd called the Beretta a ladies' gun and suggested several alternatives, one of which was the Walther. Fleming thanked Boothroyd by naming the MI6 armorer and Dr. No after him. In the film, the character of Boothroyd references his real-life counterpart's comment when he describes the Beretta, nice and light in a lady's handbag, no stopping power. Bond is unable to draw the Beretta at a critical moment when its suppressor catches on the waistband of his trousers, and is very nearly killed as a result. How does replacing the Beretta with a Walther fix that problem? It's more of a you almost died so we're looking at everything and highlighted the following issues. His gun being inadequate for his job being one of them. He rarely uses his own gun in the books anyway, and half the time when he does draw it, he gets disarmed before he can even fire it. Man with the Golden Gun is one of the few times, possibly only I can't remember, where he has it start to finish and actually uses it to kill the villain at the end. He also tries to sell Bond on a .38 airweight. Then Dr. No captures him anyway, and he fights the entire time with a stolen M1 carbine. I listened to the whole audiobook series. Bond rarely just shoots the bad guy. Dr. No, buried alive in bird shit. Red Grant, shot with his own book gun. Scaramanga, shot by Bond with his Walther. Casino Royale guy, killed by Smersh. Hugo Drax, killed by his sub being wiped out by his nuke going off near him. Diamonds Are Forever, killed by a train going off a bridge and the other by a Bofors gun shooting his helicopter. Thunderball, Domino kills the main guy. Live and Let Die, Sharks. You Only Live Twice, strangles Blofeld. Goldenfinger, sucked through a plane window. I hate engagement threads. Why can't you just say, hey, let's talk about James Bond? Why do you have to write out this disingenuous OP design to maximize the chance of replies? You aren't getting karma or clicks or subs, so why do all the mind tricks? He can't because weapons board, not James Bond board. We need a spy board. Dr. No was boiled alive in reactor water. In the film. In the book, he's buried alive by Bond moving a ship-loading crane over him and covering him in tons of bird guano. The books and the film vary greatly from each other, especially Moonraker. It was fine. Bond only actually needs a gun for executions. Never comes up because Bond is the guy that gets sent when their actual best agent, the never-seen on-screen 008, is too busy. And as a result, situations that should have ended with 2 shots to the back of the head and a clean getaway get turned into drawn-out fistfights and killing people with piranhas. Bill spends a lot of the time in the hospital. I guess he had all the time in the world. I can see 25 being useful, even unsuppressed, as likely you'll be always subsonic, and that does matter for shots. Way easier to shoot someone with a subsonic in an urban area, even unsuppressed, when most people are inside concrete and brick buildings. Was Daniel Craig a better Bond than Sean Connery? Some say yes. Did he have better writers? Some say no. Pretty sure Craig has said that the one movie was like hell on earth for him because they filmed it during the writer's strike, and the director left it up to him to rewrite scenes to better fit the character. That's gotta fucking suck whole ass. He also got seriously injured multiple times during his stint as Bond. I know he tore both of his calf muscles at the same time filming one of the stunts. The thread got me thinking. Let's say you were the armorer for the next James Bond film, and the filmmakers wanted you to replace his outdated PPK with something modern. What would the ideal gun for James Bond be if he had access to modern guns? The Brosnan films answered this for the late 90s by giving him a, at the time, brand new Walther P99. But this didn't really go anywhere because Craig switched back to the PPK. Assuming I was in charge, I'd probably go with the new 15-round Glock 43X. ASP pistol. Looks cool and fits the bill. It's a decent enough choice for real-world reasons. But I think you want something a little more visually interesting. The PPK being iconic at this point aside, it's also a really aesthetically pleasing gun, and these days also acts as a bit of a deliberate aesthetic throwback to stand out from contemporaries and successors. There's a reason that the Daniel Craig films and now IOI game went back to the PPK. I honestly don't know how you solve the problem with a new gun, but you need something that reads as a lethal tool for a dangerous man more than a practical choice for a tactical operator. It's a niche at odds with most firearm trends of the past few decades, but of course I'm thinking about filling the gap left by the PPK more than a modern counterpart for the original brief. Be Nameless Mook. Fucking supervillain boss asked me to guard some MacGuffin that'll end the world. Hey, at least I'm being paid for this shit. Feel minor impact on the back of my head. We don't get issued helmets, so a thrown rock could probably take me out. Pick small metal object that flattened against my skull. 25 ACP? That's like getting hit by a thrown plastic BB. Hear British sobbing in the shadows. Oh wait, that never happened, because 25 ACP will absolutely kill you dead. This scene always confused me. They just ordered him to start using a new gun right before sending him on a mission without giving him the chance to test it out and get used to it. I'd imagine since it's a more powerful gun, you'd really want to get used to aiming and firing it before taking it with you on a highly dangerous mission to Kingston. It's not like they handed him a Deagle brand Deagle and told him he can only hip fire it or something. A little range time would probably be polite, but he probably shouldn't be a 00 agent if he's not well versed in other small arms and able to handle a little more recoil than a pocket pistol. As stated above, the scene in the novel exists to both give an in-universe explanation for swapping the gun to something a little more fitting for the character and give a tip of the hat to the guy who wrote in about it. But the novel is also the 6th in the series. In the film, it just ends up being an odd little orphan scene. That's why I like the version of the scene better in the Ipcris file better, where the armor makes Palmer sign for it first and makes sure he knows how to use it. Dalby, give him your gun. Issue him with a Colt 32. Armor, do you know how to use this? Palmer, Colt 32? Yes, I'd sooner have my automatic. Dalby, use the Colt. Palmer, I'll use the Colt. Wouldn't a subsonic suppressed 22 LR be better for his role? If he were solely an assassin, yes. Bond's assignments tend to be a lot more broad than that, though. PPK is more steady to use after you had a few martinis. Come back to old, yes. Why did these dudes get all dressed up in their Sunday best to hit each other with flails? Because people weren't pajama-wearing, slovenly shitlord degenerates and gave a shit about their appearance. Even when they were just planning to bash some dude's skull in. Looks like a legal issue. Trial by combat was a legal matter to settle serious disputes. You would certainly wear nice clothes if you're possibly going to die, especially if it's in front of the town. Yeah, you wouldn't want people to have to dress you up after you died. Especially while your face is possibly smashed in. Do you not get dressed up before going to kill someone? That's why no one will remember your name. Because it looked awesome. I'm pretty sure this is from a dueling manuscript. It would be written for rich people, thus it depicts rich people fighting. The slashes in the top layer are a way to get around sumptuary laws limiting what commoners were allowed to wear. Mostly regarding colorful clothing. Most landsknechts were commoners. Wouldn't the ones wealthy enough to do the slashed clothing bit be closer to the proto-middle class? I don't think it's incorrect to consider them a type of merchant, albeit a merchant that peddles their fighting skills. Landsknecht were exempt from sumptuary laws as per the imperial diet of Augsburg 1503, and as many petty nobles served in the Landsknecht armies as officers, the fashion spread. This was just the normal fashion of the day. Going clubbing, you get dressed. Showing up to the flailing looking like a serf. You get 0 winches. The idea that both sides will become exhausted from wielding cumbersome weapons, thus avoiding a fatal blow, seems like a pretty good choice. It's just casual, everyday clothing as worn by the European medieval upper class. Men's fashion used to be a lot cooler before the bongs ruined it 200 years ago and decided that everyone had to dress in plain and boring dark clothes. Man has to look his best on the day he's buried. Because Renaissance Europe had a massive face culture, and how you presented yourself mattered a lot. Flail beats the chaff from the wheat. Flail beats the weakness from the man. Simple as. Are we trying to strengthen our enemies? Winner gets pussy. 1. Why the fuck wouldn't you? 2. Medieval times were extremely colorful. The gray and brown Hollywood filter is pure nonsense. Very stupid no-gun question here from V. Do suppressors really negatively affect the stats of your gun like they do in video games? I understand if you're using subsonic ammo, then velocity will be lower. I understand the potential point of aim shift, taking the suppressor on and off, and I understand sticking weight on the end of a gun can throw off any balance. But to me, those are the only real-world negatives I can think of that in the video world would negatively affect the stats. I understand video games aren't real life and guns don't have stats like in video games, but I don't know how else to phrase it. I've always thought in games that when you use a suppressor and the stats drop is stupid and just a way to balance the noise suppression in game. But is there any truth to that? From Radovan Karadzik. No. Do cans suppressor negatively affect stats in real life? They make the gun heavier mildly, increasing fatigue. Since the can is at the end of the gun, this effect is magnified. The further weight is away from the shooter, the more fatiguing it is to hold up. They also make the gun longer, which restricts movement in close quarters and might make spotting the shooter easier. If you're using subsonic ammo, then the velocity will be lower. Cans add velocity to all ammunition. A can might make subsonic ammo transonic. That's a real term. It just means air flowing around the bullet in both supersonic at the tip and subsonic at the base, so you still get the supersonic crack. I understand the potential point of aim shift taking the suppressor on and off. A lot of things can cause POI shit, like going from one box of ammo to another. Generally, cans are only removed for cleaning and are affixed to the firearm dedicated to use with them. Balance. Not much of a concern with rifles because most of the weight is still close to the shooter's body. If a very large can is attached to a pistol, it will make that pistol much more difficult to hold steady on target. Silenced firearms are far quieter in video games and movies than they are in real life. In ideal conditions, a silenced firearm is about as loud as an approaching subway train. So, pretty fucking loud. Realistically, no. There are microscopic technical quirks autists and professionals might enjoy debating, which might get used as excuses for stats in games and have increasingly been fixed by modern technology. But at the level of granularity of a video game or RPG, there is zero downside. It's a straightforward improvement with trade-offs. That's why almost everyone IRL who can get a suppressor uses one. No. I understand video games aren't real life and guns don't have stats like in video games, but I don't know how else to phrase it. The words you're looking for are affect the performance or ballistics. Possibly. At a bare minimum, point of impact is probably going to change when you put a can on or take it off, depending on the gun, can, mounting system, and a million trivialities that we won't get into here. It's also possible for a group size to get larger with the can. It's also possible for a group size to get smaller. No, we're not going to get into it here. No, they can 1. Shift your point of impact by increasing muzzle velocity and changing barrel harmonics. 2. Slightly increase bolt velocity and rate of fire with it, which can reduce reliability. 3. Get hot and melt if you shoot a lot. 4. Increase heat buildup in the barrel, reducing accuracy and reliability if you shoot a lot. Suppressors reduce noise by trapping a lot of the highly pressurized air that comes out of the gun, along with the bullet and filtering it through several chambers that slow it down before it's allowed to come out, and noise scales exponentially, so even a mild reduction in the pressure can make the sound much quieter. This obviously has effects on the gun and the gunshot itself. But the most important is that the hot explosion gases that are pushing the bullet down the barrel don't disperse immediately once the bullet stops being in contact with the barrel. This means there's slightly more pressure behind the bullet equals its push to go slightly faster, muzzle velocity. The air pressure inside the barrel doesn't go down as much before the breech is unlocked and opens to let a new cartridge in, so you have a lot more wear and strain on the bolt and breech, and you can experience failures, and felt recoil might even be harder. The gas pressure that moves a gas-operated system like a piston is much higher, which means they operate faster and harder than they might be designed to, which can mean the moving parts operate out of sync and lead to failures or dumping excess hot gases back into the receiver and causing fouling. or just blowing it in your face, making the gun slightly annoying to shoot in some cases. Back pressure. The higher gas pressure heats up the gun more, especially in the barrel, thanks to the physical properties of metal. If you were to make the downsides of suppressors accurate to real life in a game, they'd obviously weigh more but also have more recoil and damage the guns faster in the games that have that mechanic. The stat drop is generally rationalized as using subsonic ammo, which depending on the round might legitimately do less damage, if the round relies on velocity to produce wounds, like some 5.56 does. Otherwise, no, not really. Shooting suppressed with a gun not explicitly designed for it is super unpleasant because every gap in the receiver has fumes gushing out right into your face, but I've never heard of a game depicting this. Do suppressors really negatively affect the stats of your gun like they do in video games? No. At worst, it makes the gun mildly more cumbersome to use in close range due to the added length. Kinda sorta, I mean it does make your rifle front heavy and heavier in general. The rest are a bit harder to model in games, like potential gas in the face or increased wear. Weight and handling. Only works as in video games if you assume every round goes from supers to subs. Big gloss over math. Suppressors add a little FPS, approximately 10. They're a little like having a longer barrel. Also increase accuracy by reducing muscle movement. They make the gun a bit heavier, more unwieldy. Usually they make the gun build up residue faster. Other than that, there's not across the board reduced stats. But there's a bunch of conditional ones. They actually increase velocity / power somewhat, but not as much as adding the same length of barrel would have. If you're firing .45 from a fixed barrel carbine, that's that, no further downsides. If you're firing .556 from an AR, it suppresses down to the level of most unsuppressed guns, and can overwork the gas cycling system to make it wear out faster and make the felt impulse worse, and vent hot particles into your face. If you want it to actually be quiet, you basically are firing subsonic 22 LR and should just do that. If you're firing from a tilting barrel pistol, a lot of them will jam after every shot unless you add a Nielsen device, which will increase the recoil. Generally, big slow bullet means minimal effectiveness change. Tiny fast bullets don't suppress well unless you kill the fast part and make them suck. I noticed some accuracy reduction when shooting my suppressed pistol last week. I have a thick suppressor, and Dot absolute co-witnessed with standard height sights. Once the suppressor got hot enough, the heat shimmer made the target dance. Skill issue to be sure. Rare breed on suicide watch. Thing is patented. Inventors forced to innovate. Consumers get more choices. Wow, the system works. Thing is open source. Man makes a bogus patent stealing the open source invention. Man sells patent to rage greed. Rage greed sue the actual inventor who made it open source. Tim Hoffman goes on to make another open source and even simpler force reset device. Let me guess how rare greed are going to react. They'll sue Tim again and get another patent troll to file another fraudulent patent they can buy. I know you guys are 18-year-old libertarians that don't believe IP laws should exist. I get it. I've been there too, and I still pirate plenty of stuff. But ignoring patents just because they make you upset is silly and frankly counterproductive. You really don't understand patents, do you? Do you know why Amazon is the only major retailer with a single click to buy button? It's not because other people can't do it. Patents will always have their place and are useful. But you're kidding yourself believing it's a functional system. About the only people that are using it properly are medicine makers, and they effectively troll sick people by modifying formulas and functional meds so they can renew patents. I'm assuming with a standard trigger, this kicker just does safe and super kick, right? So I need to buy more super safeties now, right? Will this work on a mac and cheese with a trip bar? Holy shit, this is both genius and simple. You can make that with plate steel, a hacksaw, a drill, and some files. How would you defend a caravan in a fantasy setting if you had to have a party of 4 people only using medieval weapons and you were low level? Convince the local murder hobos to clear the path for me. Goblins and bandits become real scarce when 10th level bullshit rolls through fireballing and martial striking everything within a 300-yard radius. Step 1. Sell at least 6 of those superfluous fucking oxen before you go bankrupt trying to feed them and end up starving to death yourself. A pile of loaded matchlocks. I used my knowledge of chemistry to make black powder and make makeshift fireworks with glass to scare away the goblins. Also, pikes and hunting bows should keep away the goblins. Bonus if you have large shields. I cast Fireball. I'd go for a Hussite loadout. 2 guys with crossbows or handguns, if we can afford it, and 2 guys with pole flails. I just used my Isekai cheat power, which was the weakest, thus the reason I got kicked out of the big name adventure party, but then when I was on my own, turned out to be the strongest power and just effortlessly overcome all challenges forever. The rest of my team is just my waifu harem, who are probably slaves, but it's alright because I'm nice, and thus they want to be my slaves. I'd be a mystic knight casting spells out of my shield, and fill the rest of my party with 2 hot babe sorcerers with panties and witch hats, and 1 hot babe mage with panties and a witch hat. Weaponize the bees with a druid or someone who can communicate with animals, and while you're at it, get something more resilient and menacing than a bunch of cows to pull the cart, like a bunch of triceratops or some shit. And also ideally get a flying mount to scout around, rescue the hot babes, and murder the bad guys in one fell swoop. 2 polearm users, 1 front and 1 back. At least 1 crossbowman or archer up top. 1 swordsman with a big shield to stop the driver from being sniped if you don't have a second archer. GM keeps sending gypsies to loot the party wagon every single time it's left unattended / the party falls asleep at the same time, no matter the locale. How to respond without sounding mad? I'd say you got lucky. 4 people couldn't even fight off a determined raid by regular humans. Step 1 would be to travel as part of a larger caravan. Lol, riding in that thing would shake all the shit off the walls, and all the plants would likely be dead. Mountain Blade tells me the solution is high-tier cavalry, but aside from that, if you only have 4 people and no other factors, of course you'll want them to be as well equipped as possible. Just get 4 of the most elite warriors you can, armor the wagon, and put a big gun / crossbow on it. Travel on toll roads. Hello, Commando. Your workplace has assigned you the task of equipping and commanding a small force of armed guards to protect research teams going into the back rooms. Your primary mission: protect company science teams from hazardous environments and hostile entities. Secondary objective: destroy any and all hostile entities that could be a threat to the science team. Assist science team in mapping out the backrooms, collecting data / artifacts, and trapping entities if possible. Search and rescue. Look for any survivors / recover bodies from previous expeditions. You've been given a fairly decent budget of $3 million for equipping and training the defense team. You've also been given access to any firearm found on the US civilian market. Most non-experimental military small arms, that means pretty much any modern machine gun / SBR, and a US federal explosive license. Payroll will be done by another department and is not a part of your budget. You will be paid handsomely for your efforts and contributions to the safety of the scientific personnel under your supervision. There is one caveat. You absolutely under no circumstances take casualties. Lots of previous exploration teams have been lost, with some later recovered deceased. Your training must reflect this. If too many people go missing, people will start asking questions. Good luck. Just bring flamethrowers. Burn the backrooms to the ground. Food and manpower would be more of a limit than ammo and weaponry, but per man I'd probably give them hiking packs with 7 days of supplies plus gear, electric scooters plus a way to recharge from the ceiling lights, Mac 11 with all tracers to use on the scoot, Serbu Super Shorty with buck and dragon's breath. Add an FPV drone operator and a couple of shotgunners to the existing team. Springfield trapdoor rifles and Colt single-action army revolvers. I enter buck naked with whipped cream and a red bow on my throbbing erect penis. I put on my robe and wizard hat. If it's anything like the movie, stopping power would be necessary to take care of any of the bigger monsters. USAS-12 or SPAS-12 would be necessary. Noisemaker traps could alert teams to approaching monsters, and claymore mines with barbed wire could be used offensively. You're gonna need to go in House of Leaves style. Wired comm/radio if possible. Full camping gear for everyone. Multiple lines of rope/fishing line/whatever to track exactly where you've gone. As many flares as each person can carry. GoPros on every person's helmet. And full-size rifles for everyone. 7.62 NATO at an absolute minimum. Multiple people manning an FOB just outside the back rooms, monitoring live comm/camera feeds, and standing by for extraction of wounded. High-quality PL-8 armor. Pikes. Blackout 300 with 10-inch AR as backup with suppressor. Lots of equipment to find your way around the place. Big guy struggles to break through a door. Regular-sized randos have knife-tier durability and are full of fluff like furniture. Peg leg broke like cheap wood, so this strengthens the idea they're nothing special. Modern automatic weaponry would chew through those fuckers, even if they don't feel pain, or have the need for vital organs. They can't do much when they're torn to shreds. Really scary to unarmed civilians that wander in though. Razor wire and grenades. Lots of grenades. Basic tactic is to throw a handful of grenades into any new room we encounter while obstructing all routes not currently in use by the team. As a bonus, the razor wire will aid in navigation, acting as a highly lethal trail of breadcrumbs leading back to the EZ. Did none of you K-Anons watch the web series? Just bring high-pressure water guns or hoses for the hostile entities. High explosive/fire weapons and probably kinetic weapons only make them bigger and hard to kill. Why is this even a thread? How the hell did this thing hold 60 rounds? You'd be lucky to even fit 20 in that thing. Pentuple stack magazine or something? I don't know. It's also a very large gun. Quad stack. If you take it as lore, then this, I guess. And others have suggested using tiny grav plates to move the bullets instead of springs. But the reality is they made a mistake and made it 60 instead of 30. 30 obviously fits perfectly. It wasn't a mistake, it's just sci-fi. It's absurd to think we'll still be using 30-round mags in 500 years. That would be like a medieval archer thinking that because they carried bundles of 24 arrows, that would be the standard forever. The UNSC did not have spatial compression tech compact enough to fit into their rifles though. I don't care because the game is fun. How the hell did this thing hold 60 rounds? Because it's a fictional weapon designed to be a future mega assault rifle designed to kill 8-foot-tall snake people covered in armor plating and energy shields. You'd be lucky to even fit 20 in that thing. You can put as much ammo as you want in it. It's fictional. Mega assault rifle designed to kill 8-foot-tall snake people covered in armor plating and energy shields. Is it though? I thought it was made to kill other humans. Well, it's just a big fuck-off full-sized rifle, assault rifle. But yeah, its intended targets were armored humans. Yes, 7.62 NATO. Only the dimensions are the same. UNSC propellant technology is utterly absurd. The 9.5 by 40mm round is going 2900 FPS, which is a Magnum rifle levels of kinetic energy, and the UNSC basic bitch body armor can stop multiple hits of that at muzzle range. In addition, UNSC weapons have recoil dampening tech built into them. So stuff like 500 Magnum service pistols and 7.62 RFN rifles on full auto is feasible. The DMR/AR damage difference. I don't fucking know, man. Every source says they use the same ammo, but I can't use the shit Reach AR to stock up the god tier DMR. I just change it to 300 rum and call it a day. It's obvious that someone on the design team intended all UNSC guns to be caseless while someone else disagreed. That's how Halo lore works. You just force in what you can about your interpretation of the lore and try to retcon other people's work you disagree with. You sneak aboard projects you don't even care about to try to retcon in your own ideas under people's noses. One writer snuck in that its ammo was higher velocity than modern equivalents, though others disagreed. What fucking retard babble is this? Halo writers constantly retcon each other, often to hilarious extremes. There's a group that insists the Covenant can't glass planets and that when it's mentioned in games, it's just an exaggeration. There's a group that says the Covenant can glass planets, but their planet-killing weapons don't work in space. There's a group that says their glassing weapons work fine in space, and the whole war was a humiliating shutout where they were cutting UNSC ships in half like anime katanas. Writers just say what they want and tell other writers to get fucked. It's been this way since day one. It was literally happening in Halo 1's script department. Microsoft really needs to reset the IP. They need to sell it because they clearly have no interest in building a team that can actually make it worth following again. Just let it die. I'm tired of watching all the things I grew up with forever being remade but shittier. Yeah, that's clearly what should have happened, but it never will given the nature of the industry and intellectual property in general. If it must go on, and it will, then we might as well engage with the good shit and remain hypercritical about the bad. What medications are the best at enhancing soldiers' combat performance? Do any countries still issue performance-enhancing medications to soldiers? Viagra. Amphetamines would be more useful than benzos. Caffeine, gay sex, and ADHD medications seem to have worked since the Nazi era. Creatine. Everybody run for your lives! This motherfucker is on creatine. Nicotine and caffeine. Like the Annan above me stated. Nicotine and caffeine. Methamphetamine is just terrible and pretty much guarantees addiction. Caffeine and nicotine is all you need. And you don't even really need either. T. Addicted to both. There was a lot of work done on this in the 1960s, OP. The general answer is that beyond caffeine and strong stimulants in extreme situations, where it's worth the cost in low performance, remember, stims don't give you energy, they just stop you from feeling the tiredness. And they don't block the effects of the tiredness. It's generally not worth it. It did lead to some hilarious studies, though. What was the government's obsession with LSD back then? Dozens of agencies were experimenting with LSD on people. In what world does LSD seem like it would improve literally anything? LSD had been used with therapy to treat PTSD, and they figured they could use LSD to make guys that wouldn't normally shoot to kill more effective. It was a total wash, and if anyone in command of it had just done LSD, they would have known it wouldn't work. Seeing time as a flat circle and MDMA is being used very effectively to treat PTSD, I'm sure someone will try to get guys on Molly to kill soon. I think it was a matter of perverse incentives from when people were freaked out over and searching for explanations as to why captured American POWs in Korea were making false confessions. Tell me, which of these two explanations is more likely to get you black budget funding? The commies are just beating and starving the guys until they break. Any retard with a stick could do this. Or, actually, the commies are using super exotic drugs and elaborate psychology techniques to brainwash people into literal drones. There could be a mind control gap. It was the hot new thing, which meant that people didn't really know what it was or what it did to you. And researchers were pushing it as the new wonder drug that would do absolutely anything you wanted, so long as their lab kept receiving funding. This is all nonsense. AFAIK LSD was never considered a performance enhancer for obvious reasons. That video is from a series of tests on LSD as a non-lethal chemical weapon to incapacitate enemy forces. I'd say given how the tests went, it seems fairly effective. You may have heard of it as the gay bomb. Involuntary trembling. Trembling is involuntary by definition. Obviously substances help, but it would take significant training and effort in order to implement their use in modern, supposedly disciplined armies. Moderate doses of amphetamine specifically can improve just about every metric of someone's abilities to actually fight and physically perform for a few hours, but the situations where that would outweigh the downsides of the come-downs and crashes and the expense of training soldiers to handle themselves on drugs are limited. So yes, but it would require a lot of effort and money and would have limited application, and obviously no matter what it would cause a huge scandal as the idea of combat drugs would freak normies the fuck out. So it's not done. In Western countries at least. Captagon/phenethylline is a prodrug from the meth family invented in the 1960s. It generated a longer-lasting, milder high than drugs like Pervitin and became very popular among Middle Eastern militants due to ISIS and later Syria. While it was an improvement for combat, the side effects rule it out for Western armies, because about 25% of users start to be irrational and hallucinate after a few weeks. They've used a heap and only still use meth because sometimes guys need to stay awake a long time with minimal side effects. My only issue is they lie to the grunts about go pills instead of being honest that it's meth. USAF will feed you modafinil. Used to be prescribed that. I felt fine on it, but my regular blood pressure went from the low end of normal to the low end of high, and it'd take longer for my pulse to return to normal after working out. Advil, aspirin, and other mild painkillers were good for aches and bruises out there. Project Appleseed. Anyone here ever gone to Project Appleseed? Are the Appleseed classes good firearms training or just some political Tupperware party gimmick? I projected my seed into your mom last night. They're a white supremacist militia/prepper organization with La American Revolution as plausible deniability. It's very problematic, especially considering they are indoctrinating children too. Would avoid. You can learn to shoot the same at your local indoor range. I'm sold. Where do I join? The coolest thing ever. Fucking sweet. Anyone ever gone to Project Appleseed? No, though I've been interested in trying out one of the rifle clinics. But I live in a small state, and last year the only course available was the rimfire one like 2 hours away, and I wasn't interested in going far just for that. This year there are 2 rifle courses and both closer too. But unfortunately they are right in the middle of my first vacation trip in like 5 years. Bad luck. So I guess not until next year. I do like that they're extremely reasonable and relaxed in terms of bringing what you've got. They're fine with suppressors, irons, or scope. Whatever. No fuddy rules. I'll never buy a gun just for a training course. I want to train with what I've already got. Since it won't happen until next year, I might pick up a barrel in a cheaper caliber before then. I was considering that anyway. You do you, Anon. Just don't say I didn't warn you. The whole org turns out to be filled with glowies or insufferable sovereign citizen types. Not either of those Anons. But this isn't the experience I've known at all. The rule of no politics after 1789 is followed fine. It's a normal positive course by people who clearly enjoy the art and sport of firearms and are really trying to get the regular public to have a positive experience too. Like shit, even the Reddit gun liberals seem to like them fine. Dunno, given they're a national non-profit, that really encourages people to volunteer and chip in to run more courses. I'm sure there's a variation by the state. Maybe the courses in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont are somewhat different in feel than those in Alabama or Virginia or Texas. But if you're just there for what it says, don't see the problem. I've been to multiple Appleseed clinics. The training is good. The intro clinic teaches you how to use a sling to shoot semi-auto .22 rifle at 25 meters from standing, sitting/kneeling, and prone. There is no bipod usage allowed. Don't expect to make riflemen on the first weekend unless you have practiced quite a bit with the loop sling and with transitions from standing to sitting or prone. You may be able to use a center fire rifle for the 25-meter Appleseed, but at most locations I believe it's 22 only. They used to actually have a firing line full of ARs and SKSs and M1As long ago, but now the center fires are mostly used during the 400-yard KD clinic. They also have Pistol Seed, a rimfire event out to 200 yards, and a centerfire clinic at 400 yards. They do talk about Revolutionary War history in every Appleseed. At an Appleseed event, they don't talk about party politics, nor will they try to recruit you into any organization other than Appleseed RWVA. But then, keeping the history of Lexington and Concord alive touches on politics. Shooting at the army of the British King for purposes of resisting oppression and self-determination was political. The idea of taking up arms against a tyrannical government is political. The idea behind Appleseed is that it is a good thing to have an armed and trained population, connected with its founding history. In other words, they're supporting the general concept of armed resistance to tyranny at some theoretical point. Keeping it somewhat abstract and connected to history allows them to train a wider variety of people, including pro-gun Democrats. Of course, anti-gunners and those who believe armed resistance to government is never justified are probably not going to show up to an Appleseed. An Appleseed rifle, Bergara BXR, Track 22 fire 4 to 12 times scope, 15 round 1022 magazines, USGI cotton web sling, a real Appleseed rifle. I wonder how many people know that Appleseed originated with a guy who hawked M14 stocks and wrote rambling screeds in Shotgun News. He was like a dinosaur from the old conspiracy culture, still ranting well into the 2010s about how the UN was going to occupy America with troops from former Warsaw Pact countries, and you needed to be a real rifleman with an M14 to punch through blue helmets and BMPs. Now that sounds interesting. Can you link or screenshot some of these articles? It was called Fred's M14 Stocks. I don't think there are any archives of old Shotgun News issues anywhere, but he was very proud of this story and published excerpts from it in his ads from time to time. You can buy poorly photocopied and stapled copies for $5 each on his website. Minimum order $75 though. I mistakenly wrote earlier that Appleseed is shot at 25 yards. It's actually 25 meters. Here's the course of fire to pass. Hitting 210 out of 250 is the goal. Getting down in stages 2 and 3 and getting NPOA established. Then getting all shots off in time, but not rushing it too much, is the most difficult part for me. By order of the Crown, surrender your Ruger 1022s at once!
Wow.